I came to visit my daughter on Thanksgiving Day, and her husband slammed the door in my face. I have nothing to thank you for, old man. Get out. My daughter added, Dad, there are only important people here. You don't belong here. I turned to leave, when suddenly their big boss stood up from the table and shouted, Partner, wait! I'm with you! My son-in-law's glass shattered on the floor, and a dead silence fell over the room, and I realized it was time to reveal the whole truth. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and write in the comments what time it is where you are now. The phone rang while I sat at my desk reviewing old fidelity statements. Tuesday afternoon sun slanting through the blinds. Jennifer's name glowed on the screen. I set down the papers and answered, already smiling. Dad? Hi. Listen, I know this is last minute, but I need a favor. Her voice carried that familiar warmth, the one that still made me think of her at 7 years old, gap-toothed and laughing. We're hosting Thanksgiving this year, my boss and some key people from work. I want to make a good impression, but the catering costs more than I budgeted. I was already pulling up my banking app on the computer, phone cradled against my shoulder. Of course, honey. How much do you need? I can transfer it right now. 1,200. I know it's a lot, but there'll be 8 people, and I want it to be perfect. My fingers moved across the keyboard without hesitation. $1,200. I'd given her $30,000 for her wedding, 4 years of UT tuition, $25,000 toward her house down payment. What was $1,200 more? Consider it done, I said, hitting the confirm button. That's wonderful you're making such good connections at work. What time should I arrive on Thursday? I'll bring that cranberry dish you used to love, the one with orange zest. Silence. Not the comfortable silence of someone thinking, but something colder. Calculated. The air in my office seemed to change temperature. Actually, Dad, her voice had shifted entirely, stripped of warmth like paint peeling off metal. You're not invited. This is really a business dinner, not a family thing. I gripped the edge of my desk, the wood grain pressed into my palm. I'm sorry, what? It's a professional gathering. My boss, the VP of sales, some department heads. It's important for my career advancement. It's not personal. The words hit me in waves. Not invited. Business dinner, not personal. I stood without deciding to, walked to the window overlooking my small yard. The live oak I'd planted when Jennifer was born had grown tall, its branches spreading wide. 28 years of growth. Jennifer, my voice came out steady, which surprised me. I paid for 4 years at UT. I gave you $30,000 for your wedding. I helped with your house down payment. And now you're telling me I'm not good enough for your Thanksgiving table? I'm 38 years old, Dad. Defensive now. Sharp edges on every word. I've built my own life. I can't have you showing up in your old flannel shirts and that ancient pickup truck when I'm trying to impress the VP of sales. You don't fit. Don't fit. I turned from the window. My reflection in the dark computer screen showed a 64-year-old man in jeans and a work shirt, gray hair, lines around the eyes, the face of someone who'd spent decades building wealth, quietly, living modestly, helping family without question. So I'm an embarrassment, not a question, a statement. You make everything so dramatic. Look, I've got to finish shopping. The money's already in my account, right? Thanks, Dad. I'll call you after the holiday. The line went dead. I stood there holding the phone, listening to silence that felt louder than any shout. The screen showed her contact photo, Jennifer at her college graduation, arms around my shoulders, both of us grinning. That was 12 years ago. When had things changed? Or had they always been this way, and I'd simply refused to see it? I walked back to my desk slowly, placed the phone down with deliberate care. The fidelity statements lay scattered across the surface, evidence of investments made wisely, of money grown patiently over 40 years. More than enough, more than she knew. From the bottom drawer, I pulled out a framed photograph. Jennifer at 5, sitting on my shoulders at Zilker Park, her hands in my hair, both of us laughing at something her mother had said, back when I was tall enough to carry the world, back when she wanted me there. I stared at that little girl's face for a long moment, then turned the frame face down on the desk. The sun had moved lower, painting the office walls amber and gold. 2 days before Thanksgiving, my daughter had just taken $1,200 and told me I wasn't good enough to sit at her table. told me I didn't fit in the life I'd helped her build. I sat back down, the leather chair creaking. My hands lay flat on the desk, steady and calm. The hurt was there, yes, a physical thing in my chest, heavy and sharp. But underneath it, something else was forming, something colder than hurt, more focused than anger. I looked at the phone, at the face-down photograph, at the bank transfer confirmation still glowing on my computer screen. Something fundamental had shifted. I could feel it settling into my bones like winter cold, like a decision made without words. Jennifer thought she knew who I was, an old man in flannel and faded jeans, someone to use and dismiss, someone who didn't fit. She had no idea who I actually was, what I was capable of, how much power quiet men could hold when they finally decided to use it. The office darkened around me as I sat there, perfectly still, while something new took root in the space where fatherly love used to live. I sat in that chair for 20 minutes after Jennifer hung up, watching the walls darken. The phone lay silent on the desk, the face-down photograph, the bank transfer confirmation still glowing accusingly on my computer screen. $1,200. I stood and walked to the filing cabinet, pulled open the bottom drawer, manila folders, labeled in my careful handwriting. Jennifer, education. Jennifer, wedding. Jennifer, house purchase. Jennifer, vehicle loan. I spread them across the desk, opening each one. Tuition receipts from UT, copies of checks I'd written over 4 years, the wire transfer confirmation for $30,000 the week before her wedding, the cashier's check for $25,000 toward her house down payment. Numbers, evidence, years of saying yes without hesitation. I picked up the phone. My hands were steady. That surprised me, that my hands could be so calm when something cold and certain had settled in my chest. I wasn't acting from emotion. I was acting from principle. There was a difference. Jennifer answered on the third ring. Dad, I really don't have time. Jennifer, I've thought about our conversation. My voice came out level, almost businesslike. If I'm not welcome as your father at Thanksgiving, then I can't give you money as your father. I need you to return the $1,200. Silence again, but this time it felt different, shocked instead of calculated. Are you serious right now? Her voice climbed an octave. You're being petty over $1,200? I've already bought everything, Dad. The groceries, the rental dishes, the wine. It's done. You can't do this to me. I walked to the window, looked out at the darkening yard. I'm not trying to hurt you. I'm simply respecting your boundary. You made it clear I'm not family enough for your table. So this becomes a business matter. Oh my God! She wasn't shouting yet, but close. This is unbelievable. You're a petty old man. This is exactly why I didn't invite you. You always make everything about you. I can't believe you're ruining my career opportunity over your hurt feelings. I remained silent. Let her words fill the space between us. Let them expose exactly what she thought of me. Do you know how important Thursday is? She continued, voice rising. The VP of sales, Dad. If I make the right impression, I could get promoted to regional manager. But no, you have to make this about your precious pride. Jennifer, I've worked so hard for this, and you're going to sabotage me because I hurt your feelings. Grow up. I heard movement on her end, muffled voices. Then a different voice came on the line, male and aggressive. Listen, old man. Brian, my son-in-law, the one who worked in pharmaceutical sales, drove a leased BMW, wore suits that cost more than my monthly utilities. Stop ruining Jenny's mood before her important evening. She's stressed enough without you pulling this guilt trip nonsense. I gripped the phone tighter but kept my voice neutral. Brian, this is between Jennifer and me. No, it's between you and reality. His tone carried contempt, the kind men use when they think they're talking to someone weak. You want your pathetic money? Fine. You'll get it after the holiday. But right now, you need to stop calling and leave us alone. Jenny's got important people to impress, and she doesn't need her father acting like a child. The line went dead. I stood there in the growing darkness, phone still pressed to my ear, listening to nothing. Then slowly I lowered it and placed it on the desk beside the folders full of receipts and checks and wire transfer confirmations. The room had gone fully dark now. I didn't move to turn on the lights. I sat back down in my chair, hands folded on the desk in front of me, the phone silent beside them. Pathetic money. Old man, acting like a child. Brian's words echoed in the darkness, but underneath them I heard something else. Jennifer's voice saying I didn't fit, that I was an embarrassment, that my flannel shirts and pickup truck weren't good enough for her carefully curated professional image. They saw me as weak, as someone to use and dismiss, someone whose feelings didn't matter as long as his bank account did. The phone call had solved nothing. If anything, it had made things crystalline clear. Jennifer had no intention of apologizing. Brian had no respect for me at all. They'd taken the money, dismissed my pain, and hung up thinking the matter was closed. They were wrong. I sat in that darkening office, shadows pooling in the corners, the street lights outside beginning to glow through the blinds. My breathing was calm. My hands were steady. The hurt was still there, yes, but it had transformed into something else now. Something colder, more purposeful. I'd spent 64 years being reasonable, being generous, being the man who said yes, who helped without conditions, who gave without keeping score. I'd built wealth quietly, lived simply, asked for nothing in return except basic respect, basic human decency. And my own daughter had just shown me what she really thought of that life, what they both thought of me. I looked at the phone on my desk, at the folders full of evidence of love that now felt like evidence of foolishness, at the face-down photograph of a little girl who didn't exist anymore, replaced by a woman who saw her father as an embarrassment to be hidden away. The phone conversation had solved nothing. Words wouldn't fix this. Explanations wouldn't change their minds. They'd made their choice. They'd shown me exactly who they were. Now I needed to show them who I was. Not the old man in flannel shirts they thought they knew. Not the weak, pathetic figure they dismissed so easily. The real me. The one I'd kept hidden behind decades of quiet generosity and patient love. I would need to face them in person. Soon. Very soon. But first, I needed to think. To plan. To make sure that when I acted, it would be with the same cold clarity that was settling into my bones like ice forming on a winter lake. I sat there in the darkness, perfectly still, while something new and certain crystallized inside me. Something that felt less like anger and more like justice. Less like revenge and more like education. They thought they knew who I was. They were about to learn otherwise. That evening stretched into night. I didn't leave my office, didn't turn on more than the desk lamp. The phone remained where I'd placed it, silent and accusatory. Sleep wouldn't come. I knew that without trying. Instead, I pulled open the bottom drawer of my desk, the one I rarely touched. Photo albums, document folders, the archaeological record of fatherhood. I spread them across the desk methodically, arranging them by year. An investor's approach to analyzing a relationship. The numbers told a story I'd been too willing to overlook. University of Texas tuition receipts, 4 years' worth. I ran my finger down each semester total, $85,000. I remembered Jennifer calling before each payment was due, her voice bright and grateful. "Thanks so much, Dad. I'll make you proud." I'd written those checks without hesitation. Proud she'd gotten into a good school. Proud she was building a future. The wedding folder came next. $30,000 transferred the week before she married Brian. The venue, the flowers, the photographer. I'd walked her down the aisle in my one good suit. At the reception, I'd sat at the father of the bride table with an empty chair beside me, her mother gone 12 years by then. Brian's parents had brought 20 guests. Mine was a population of 1. House down payment, $45,000. The paperwork showed the wire transfer date. March 15th, 3 years ago. She'd called it a loan initially. "Just until we get settled, Dad." The repayment plan had evaporated within months, replaced by silence when I gently mentioned it once. Just once. I hadn't brought it up again. Vehicle loan, $15,000. "Just temporary. We'll pay you back in 6 months." That was 36 months ago. I pulled out my legal pad and wrote down each amount. Not obsessively, factually. The column of numbers grew, and at the bottom I drew a line and added them. $175,000 across 15 years. I underlined the total once, then pushed the pad away. The money wasn't the point, the pattern was. Between the financial records, I found photographs. Jennifer at 7, gap-toothed and laughing on my shoulders at Zilker Park. Jennifer at 13, rolling her eyes at something I'd said but smiling despite herself. Jennifer at 18, high school graduation, me standing beside her alone because her mother had already been gone 6 years. I picked up the graduation photo and studied it. I remembered that day, the heat, the metal folding chairs, the pride swelling in my chest when they called her name. She'd hugged me after the ceremony, whispered thank you for everything, against my shoulder. When had that girl disappeared? I searched through the more recent photos. Her wedding, where she'd barely spoken to me during the reception, holiday cards she'd sent, generic messages printed by a service, her signature a quick scrawl. Photos from Christmas 3 years ago, the last time I'd been invited to her home. Even then, I remembered feeling like an obligation. Someone checked off a list rather than welcomed. I tried to remember the last time Jennifer had called just to talk, just to ask how I was doing, not to request something, not to update me on her life in that breezy way that required no response, just to connect. I couldn't find that memory. My wife's death came back to me then, Susan, gone at 52 from ovarian cancer that moved too fast for treatment. Jennifer had been 26, living in her first apartment, starting her career. I remembered thinking she'd lean on me, that grief would pull us closer. Instead, she'd pulled away, called less, visited rarely. At the funeral, she'd stood dry-eyed and composed while I struggled to hold myself together. Later, she'd told me I needed to move forward instead of dwelling. Maybe my grief had embarrassed her even then. I closed the last folder as dawn light began filtering through the blinds. The desk was covered with evidence, years of saying yes, years of hoping that love and generosity would be enough to keep my daughter in my life. It hadn't been enough, because what Jennifer wanted wasn't a father. She wanted a bank account with no questions attached. I stood and walked through my house as morning arrived. The living room with its comfortable but dated sofa. The kitchen with appliances that worked fine, even if they weren't stainless steel. The guest room that Jennifer had used during college breaks, now just storage for boxes I never opened. I saw it all through her eyes, inadequate, embarrassing, not good enough for her carefully curated image. This home was honest. It was real, unlike the facade she was building with my money. I showered and dressed in my usual clothes. Clean jeans, a simple blue button-down shirt, my comfortable jacket. I didn't try to dress up or change who I was. That wasn't the point of what I was about to do. In the bathroom mirror, I studied my reflection. Gray hair, lines around the eyes, a 64-year-old man who'd spent his life being reasonable, being generous, being patient. That patience had limits. I'd found them. Today was Thanksgiving. Jennifer expected me to stay away, to accept my dismissal quietly, to disappear back into my modest life until she needed another deposit. I would not. I was going to Round Rock. I was going to stand at her door, not to beg for a seat at her table. That dignity was gone. But to look her in the eyes in front of her important guests and demand she justify this treatment. Demand she acknowledge what she'd done. This wasn't about $1,200 anymore. It wasn't even about the $175,000 before that. This was about making her see me, really see me, not as a resource to be tapped or an embarrassment to be hidden, but as a human being who deserved basic respect. She said I didn't fit in her life. Fine. Let's see how well I fit standing on her doorstep when her boss is watching. The drive to Round Rock took 40 minutes through Thanksgiving traffic. I kept my hands steady on the wheel of my old F-150, maintained exactly the speed limit. At red lights, I watched families in newer cars, saw houses decorated with fall wreaths and lights. Normal people having normal holidays. I'd had all day to change my mind. Morning had come and gone. Afternoon had faded into early evening. Each hour had been an opportunity to stay home, to let this go, to be the accommodating father Jennifer expected. I hadn't taken any of those opportunities. It was 6 o'clock when I turned onto Jennifer's street. The subdivision was upscale, large houses with manicured lawns, 3 car garages, stone facades that all looked vaguely Mediterranean. Her house sat on a corner lot, lights blazing from every window. The driveway overflowed with vehicles, a silver Mercedes, a black BMW, 2 Teslas, a Lexus SUV. More cars lined the curb. I parked my truck at the end of the row. The contrast was sharp, my '09 Ford with its faded paint and minor dents sitting among machines that cost more than most people's annual salary. I cut the engine and sat there for a moment. Through the large front windows, I could see people moving. The house had that open concept design Jennifer had insisted on, living room, dining room, and kitchen flowing together in one expensive space. Guests held wine glasses, stood in clusters, laughed at things I couldn't hear. Jennifer appeared briefly, wearing a burgundy dress, carrying a platter. Brian moved behind her in a dark suit, playing host. The scene looked perfect. Magazine quality. Successful. I climbed out of the truck and walked toward the house. The path was stone, expensive pavers fitted together without gaps. Landscaping lights illuminated ornamental grasses and shaped shrubs. Through the door, I could hear music. Something classical, something safe. I straightened my jacket, took one breath, and knocked. Firm. Steady. 3 times. The conversation inside paused. I heard footsteps. The door swung open, revealing Brian in a charcoal suit that probably cost $2,000. Behind him, I saw approximately 20 people turning toward the door, curious about the interruption. Crystal glasses caught the light. The dining table held more food than those people could possibly eat. Brian's expression shifted fast, curiosity to recognition to something hard and dismissive. He didn't invite me in. Instead, he stepped into the doorway, one hand on the frame, physically blocking entry. "What are you doing here?" His voice carried into the house, loud enough for everyone to hear. Intentionally loud. "I have nothing to thank you for, old man. Get out of here." I kept my voice level. "I came to speak with my daughter. This is still a family holiday, regardless of your guest list." Movement behind Brian. Jennifer appeared, her face showing confusion that rapidly became fury. Not fury at Brian's words, fury at my presence. "Dad, what are you doing?" Her voice pitched higher than normal, flustered. "I told you not to come. This dinner is for respectable people. You don't belong here." The words hit like physical blows, but I kept my expression neutral. I looked past them at the guests. Some averted their eyes. Others watched with that uncomfortable fascination people have for family drama. A few smiled awkwardly, unsure how to react. 20 pairs of eyes, all witnessing this. "I see," I said quietly. 20 people at your table, and not one seat for your father, the man who paid for this house." Jennifer's face flushed. "This is a professional dinner. I can't have—" She stopped herself, but the rest hung in the air. "Can't have you embarrassing me." Brian stepped closer, using his height advantage. "You heard her. She doesn't want you here. Nobody does. Now leave before you embarrass yourself more." I stood on that doorstep, feeling the weight of humiliation settle over me. Public rejection, performed for an audience. Some of the guests had moved closer, openly watching now. A woman in pearls whispered something to the man beside her. Someone else looked away uncomfortably. I could force this, could raise my voice, could demand entry, could make a scene that would definitely ruin Jennifer's evening. But something stopped me, not weakness, but calculation. Creating chaos now would make me look desperate, would validate every dismissive thing they'd said about me. I nodded once, not in agreement, in acknowledgement. I was about to turn away, about to walk back to my truck and leave them to their perfect dinner, when a voice called out from inside the house. "Samuel Hunt?" The voice cut through the awkward silence. Male, older, carrying authority. I froze. Brian's expression shifted, confusion replacing his smug dismissal. Jennifer turned, her face going pale. A man in his 60s pushed through the cluster of guests. Tall, silver-haired, wearing an expensive suit that somehow didn't look pretentious. I recognized him immediately, though I hadn't seen him in person for years. Richard Coleman, former CEO of the company where I'd worked for 23 years before retiring. The man who'd personally overseen my department, who'd called me into his office when I'd announced my retirement to tell me I'd been one of the most valuable analysts the company had ever employed. He reached the door, looked at me, then at Brian, blocking the doorway, then back at me. "Samuel," he said, his voice warm with genuine pleasure, "I thought that was you. What in the world are you doing standing out here?" I had made my decision. Creating a scene here, Arguing with Brian and Jennifer in front of their guests would only validate everything they'd said about me. I could see it in the faces watching from inside, some pitying, others uncomfortable, a few openly entertained by the drama. The heat of shame pressed against my face like summer sun. I nodded once, not in agreement, in acknowledgement that I understood exactly where I stood. I turned toward the stone walkway, shoulders square, head up. I wasn't fleeing. I was choosing to leave. "Partner! Sam! Wait! I'm coming with you!" The voice cut through the murmur of guests like a blade. Loud, commanding, familiar in a way that made my steps falter. I stopped mid-stride, one foot still raised, and turned back. Through the cluster of people inside, a tall man in an expensive gray suit pushed forward. He moved with purpose, setting down a wine glass on a side table without looking, parting the crowd simply by his presence. When he reached the door, he didn't ask Brian to move. He physically displaced him, stepping onto the porch beside me. Richard Coleman. I hadn't seen him in person for 3 years, though we'd exchanged emails about quarterly reports and investment strategies. He looked older, more silver in his hair, deeper lines around his eyes, but he carried the same authority I remembered from the 1990s, when we'd built our first venture capital fund together. "Sam?" His face showed genuine confusion and concern. "What are you doing here? I didn't know you knew the tenors. This is supposed to be my employees' Thanksgiving dinner." "Employees." The word hung in the air like smoke. "I didn't know you'd be here either," I said quietly. Richard's eyes moved from me to Jennifer and Brian, then back. I watched understanding begin to dawn on his face, the way puzzle pieces click together when you finally see the pattern. "Wait." He looked at Jennifer, his expression sharpening. "Jennifer Tenor. Tenor is your married name. Your maiden name was Hunt, wasn't it?" He turned to me slowly. "Sam Hunt. Is she your daughter?" The question suspended everything. The background music still played, something classical and safe, but every conversation had stopped. Jennifer's face drained of color. Brian's mouth opened without sound. I could see guests in the back pulling out phones, ready to capture whatever came next. "Yes," I said. My voice came out steady, factual. "Jennifer is my daughter. I came to wish her happy Thanksgiving. It seems that was a mistake." Richard's expression shifted through several stages. Comprehension, then disbelief, then something cold and sharp. He looked at Brian, at Jennifer, then back at me. "A mistake?" His voice carried an edge I remembered from difficult board meetings, from negotiations that weren't going well. "You came to your own daughter's Thanksgiving dinner, and you were turned away at the door, while she's entertaining her boss and colleagues?" The silence stretched taut. Jennifer gripped the doorframe, knuckles white. Brian had taken an involuntary step backward, his earlier aggression evaporating. Richard looked between them for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice carried through the open door to every guest inside. "Someone needs to explain this to me, right now." No one moved. Jennifer's mouth opened, closed. Brian seemed frozen. The guests pressed closer, an audience waiting for the next act. Richard didn't wait for their explanation. He turned slightly, addressing not just me, but everyone within earshot. "I think everyone should understand who Samuel Hunt is." His words came out clear, deliberate, cutting through the awkward silence. "He's not just my old partner from the 90s. Sam is one of the founding investors in Pinnacle Ventures." I saw several guests exchange glances. A few nodded. They recognized the name. Richard continued, his tone matter-of-fact, but his words devastating. "Pinnacle Ventures holds a 35% stake in Tech Vision Solutions. That makes Sam one of the largest partial owners of the company, where you all work." Someone gasped. A phone made a camera shutter sound. The remaining color drained from Jennifer's face. Brian's hand, still holding a wine glass, trembled visibly. Richard looked directly at Brian, holding his gaze. "This man could buy your house with cash and not notice the expense." He paused. "Let that sink in. And you just told him he has nothing to be thanked for." Brian's grip on the wine glass went slack. The glass fell, seemed to fall in slow motion, then shattered against the tile entryway. Red wine spread across the white grout like blood. No one moved to clean it up. "We'll be discussing your treatment of company investors Monday morning," Richard said, his voice formal now, carrying the weight of professional consequence. 9 o'clock, my office. Don't be late. Jennifer swayed slightly, gripping the doorframe as if it were the only thing keeping her upright. Her free hand went to her throat, then to her stomach. She looked like she might be sick. Richard turned to me, his expression softening immediately. Come on, partner. Let's find somewhere to celebrate Thanksgiving with people who know the meaning of gratitude and respect. He gestured toward the assembled guests. For a moment, no one moved. Then a woman in her 50s, senior manager, I recognized her vaguely from company events, stepped forward decisively, setting down her drink. I think I'll join you, she said clearly. Her movement broke whatever spell held the others. 3 more guests stepped forward, 2 men and another woman, all reaching for coats, abandoning drinks on various surfaces. They were making a choice, publicly aligning themselves away from their hosts. Richard took my arm, not supporting me, but as an equal, a partner. We walked down the stone path toward the street. The 4 guests followed, already talking quietly among themselves. Behind us, I heard the murmur rising, whispers spreading through the remaining crowd. I didn't look back. The November evening air felt cool against my face, clearing away the heat of earlier humiliation. Richard was already talking, his voice warm and conversational, as if we were simply old friends meeting for dinner, as planned. There's a steakhouse in Lakeway I've been wanting to try, he said, unless you'd prefer somewhere else. We walked down the path in a loose group, Richard and I in front, the 4 employees trailing behind us. The cool November air carried voices from inside Jennifer's house, rising in volume as we moved away. Speculation, gossip, the sound of a party collapsing. Behind us, I heard Jennifer's door close. Not slammed. That would have implied anger, control. This was quiet, the soft click of someone whose strength had failed. Richard waited until we reached the street, stood beside my old F-150, before speaking again. The 4 guests had paused a respectful distance away, giving us space. Sam, he turned to face me fully. I need to understand what just happened. You came to your daughter's Thanksgiving dinner and she turned you away, in front of her colleagues, her boss? I looked at him, this man who'd been my partner nearly 3 decades ago, who'd trusted my analysis when we were building something from nothing, who'd made millions alongside me when our early investments paid off. She called Tuesday asking for money, I said quietly. $1,200 for catering. I transferred it immediately. Then I asked what time to arrive for dinner. She told me I wasn't invited. Said it was a business gathering and I didn't fit. Richard's jaw tightened. Because of how you look? How you dress? Apparently my flannel shirts and old truck are embarrassing. I glanced at my F-150, its faded paint stark against the luxury vehicles lining the street. She said I don't belong with respectable people. That's... Richard stopped himself, visibly controlling his anger. Sam, I had no idea. I've known Jennifer for 2 years. She joined our marketing department right out of her previous company. Never mentioned she had family in Austin. Never mentioned you at all. That shouldn't have hurt. After everything tonight, it shouldn't have added anything to the weight. But it did. Brian works for you too? I asked. Pharmaceutical liaison, handles our medical software contracts. Richard's expression hardened. Both of them just committed a significant career mistake. You don't humiliate investors. You especially don't humiliate investors who've been with the company since seed funding. One of the employees who'd followed us, a man in his 40s, someone I vaguely recognized from annual reports, approached carefully. Mr. Hunt, I'm Michael Reeves, Senior Operations Manager. I just wanted to say, what happened in there was completely inappropriate. I'm sorry you had to experience that. The woman who'd stepped forward first joined him. Catherine Price, HR Director. I agree with Michael. That was unprofessional, and she paused, choosing her words carefully. Personally, cruel. The other 2 employees murmured agreement. They were being careful, diplomatic, but their message was clear. They'd witnessed something that crossed lines, both personal and professional. Thank you, I said simply. Richard looked at the 4 of them. Catherine, Michael, I trust you'll handle any workplace discussions about tonight with appropriate discretion. Of course, Catherine said immediately, though I suspect the discussion will happen regardless of what we do or don't say. Let it happen, Richard said. Sometimes people need to see consequences play out. He turned to me. Sam, I meant what I said about dinner. These four are welcome too, if they'd like, or we can make it just us. Catch up properly. I looked at the group. These people had made a choice to leave a party, to publicly align with me against their colleague. The calculation behind it might have been professional, but the gesture still meant something. I think dinner together sounds right, I said, if everyone's willing. The agreement was immediate. Michael suggested the steakhouse Richard had mentioned. Catherine offered to call ahead for a table. Within minutes, we'd formed a caravan, Richard's Mercedes leading, my truck following, the other 3 vehicles behind. As I climbed into my F-150, I glanced once at Jennifer's house. Through the large windows, I could see figures moving, guests gathering coats, the party clearly ending early. I couldn't see Jennifer or Brian. They were probably in a back room somewhere, dealing with the wreckage. I started the engine and followed Richard's taillights through the subdivision. The drive to Lakeway took 35 minutes. We drove in convoy, maintaining formation through traffic. My truck's cab felt different somehow, less like a mark of inadequacy, more like simple transportation. What had felt embarrassing hours ago now felt honest. The steakhouse sat on a hill overlooking Lake Travis. Richard had called ahead during the drive. They had a private room waiting. The 6 of us settled around a heavy wooden table, menus appearing immediately, a server pouring water with practiced efficiency. "Order whatever you want," Richard said, looking at me specifically. "This is on me. Consider it compensation for the evening you should have had." The conversation started slowly, carefully. The employees knew they were in unusual territory. Having Thanksgiving dinner with the CEO and a major investor wasn't typical, but Richard had a gift for putting people at ease, and gradually the awkwardness faded. Michael talked about operations challenges. Catherine mentioned upcoming HR initiatives. The other 2, James and Susan, I learned their names, discussed their departments. They included me naturally in the conversation, asked questions about the early days of the company, seemed genuinely interested in the investment side of the business. Richard ordered wine, a bottle that probably cost more than Jennifer's entire catering budget. When it arrived, he raised his glass. "To Samuel Hunt," he said, "a man who taught me that quiet competence beats loud performance every time, and to the importance of remembering where we come from and who helped us get here." The words hit harder than they should have. I raised my glass with the others, felt the weight of unexpected gratitude mixing with the residue of earlier humiliation. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Once, twice, 3 times. I ignored it. We ate well, steaks cooked perfectly, sides that actually tasted like food instead of decoration. Richard told stories about our early investing days, made me sound more impressive than I'd felt at the time. The employees laughed, relaxed, stopped being quite so carefully professional. My phone buzzed again and again. "You should probably check that," Richard said quietly, "in case it's important." I pulled out my phone. 7 missed calls, 12 text messages, all from Brian's number. The first text message read, "You vindictive old man, you did this on purpose." I put the phone away without reading the rest. The dinner continued for another hour. Richard kept the conversation flowing, asking about operations challenges, discussing market trends, making everyone comfortable, but my mind had split, half present at the table, half already calculating what Brian's messages meant. Around 9:30, we settled the bill despite my protests. Richard insisted. "You've had enough taken from you tonight," he said quietly. "Let me give something back." Outside, the November air had turned cold. We stood in the parking lot, 6 people who'd shared an unexpected evening together. "This was better than any corporate dinner I've attended," Catherine said. She looked at me directly. "Thank you for your hospitality, Mr. Hunt. I hope we see you at company events in the future." The others echoed similar sentiments. We exchanged handshakes, and then they were climbing into their vehicles, taillights disappearing into the night. Richard lingered. "You all right, Sam?" Those messages were from Brian. "He's angry." "I'd expect so." Richard's expression hardened. He should be more worried than angry. What he and Jennifer did tonight, that has professional consequences. We don't mistreat investors, and we especially don't humiliate them publicly. "I didn't plan any of this." "I know. That's what makes it worse for them." He squeezed my shoulder. "Get some rest. We'll talk Monday. And Sam, you did nothing wrong. Remember that." I drove home alone, my truck feeling particularly empty after the convoy earlier. The roads were quiet, most of Austin already settled into their post-Thanksgiving stupor. I pulled into my driveway around 10:15, killed the engine, and sat there for a moment, looking at my house. Modest, comfortable, honest. Everything Jennifer had rejected. Inside, I poured a glass of water and stood at the kitchen sink, staring out at the dark backyard. My phone buzzed again, then again. I pulled it out. 15 text messages now. 22 missed calls. I opened the messages. The first few were variations on the same theme. Accusations, fury, blame. Then Brian's tone shifted. "You think you can ruin us? We'll make you regret this." "Jennifer is devastated. Her career is over because of your vindictiveness. We'll find a way to pay you back for this humiliation." The threats were clear, if vague. I screenshot each message, backed them up to my cloud storage. Evidence. If this was going to escalate, I'd need documentation. The phone rang in my hand. Brian's name on the screen. I stepped into my office and answered. "Yes?" "You think you're so clever, don't you?" Brian's voice shook with barely controlled rage. "Showing up tonight, playing the wounded father, getting Richard on your side. You humiliated us. You destroyed our reputation in front of my boss and the entire office." I kept my voice level. "I came to wish my daughter happy Thanksgiving. You chose to turn me away at the door in front of your guests. Richard recognized me. The consequences are yours, not mine." "Consequences?" His voice climbed higher. "Jennifer might lose her promotion because of you. Do you understand that? Years of work, ruined because you couldn't handle not being invited to one dinner. If her career suffers, it's because of how she treated me, Brian, not because I responded. You'll regret this." He was shouting now, the control completely gone. "We're not going to let you destroy what we've built. We'll find a way to make you pay for this. You're going to wish you'd just stayed home." I held the phone away from my ear as he continued, his words dissolving into incoherent fury. When the tirade finally ended with ragged breathing, I brought the phone back. "Are you finished?" I asked quietly. Silence. Then, "You're good. Don't call this number again unless you have something productive to say." I hung up, set the phone on my desk, stared at it for a long moment. Brian's threat echoed in my mind. Not the specific words. Those were empty bluster from a frightened man. But the intent behind them. They weren't going to accept this quietly. They weren't going to learn from it, or change. They were going to fight back. I looked around my office. The filing cabinet with years of documentation. The computer with access to investment accounts and company reports. The phone with Brian's threatening messages backed up in 3 separate locations. Jennifer thought I was weak because I lived modestly. Brian thought I was irrelevant because I didn't flaunt my wealth. They'd both underestimated me completely. I opened my laptop and created a new folder. Jennifer Documentation. Started compiling files. Bank transfers. Loan agreements. Email requests for money. Every piece of evidence from the past 15 years. This wasn't over. It was just beginning. Friday morning arrived with pale sunlight and 5 text messages from Jennifer, all sent between midnight and 3 a.m. "How could you do this to us? Brian is terrified he'll be fired because of your stunt. You had no right to embarrass us in front of my boss. This is so unfair. We just wanted a nice dinner. You've always been selfish, but this is a new low." I read them over coffee at my kitchen table. Anger, accusations, victimhood. Not one word of apology or self-reflection. I didn't respond. Saturday brought a different tone. "Dad, we didn't know Richard was your old partner. If you'd told us about your investments, things would have been different. You always acted like you were struggling. How were we supposed to know? We would have included you if we'd understood your actual situation." Still no apology, just justification. The message was clear. They would have treated me better if they'd known I had money. The fact that I was her father apparently wasn't reason enough. Sunday's messages shifted again. "Can we please just move past this? You're still my father. Family is supposed to forgive. Let's have dinner this week, just us, and talk everything through. We can start fresh. I miss you, Dad. Can we fix this?" Manipulation now, false warmth. She missed me, but only after learning about my net worth. I screenshot every message, added them to the documentation folder, watched the pattern emerge. Rage when consequences appeared, justification when rage didn't work, manipulation when justification failed. Not once did she say she was wrong. Not once did she acknowledge that rejecting her father at Thanksgiving was cruel, regardless of his financial status. Monday morning, I met Richard at a cafe in downtown Austin. He was already there when I arrived, sitting at a corner table with 2 coffees waiting. "You look tired," he said as I sat down. "Been a busy weekend. Lots of messages from Jennifer." "I can imagine." He slid his phone across the table. "You should see these." I looked at the screen. Emails forwarded to Richard from various employees. Carefully redacted to protect the senders, but the content was clear. Multiple people reporting that Jennifer and Brian had been talking around the office for months about Jennifer's poor father who couldn't get his life together. Using my supposed financial struggles as part of their narrative, the self-made professionals who succeeded despite difficult family backgrounds. "They've been using you as their origin story," Richard said quietly, the obstacle they overcame. I set the phone down carefully. "How many people have come forward?" 7 so far. 3 from marketing, 2 from sales, 1 from IT, 1 from operations. All uncomfortable after Thursday night, realizing the story was fabricated. They turned my privacy into their marketing material. Worse, they turned your choice to live modestly into evidence of failure. Richard leaned back. "The office atmosphere right now is tense. Some people find this entertaining gossip. Others are genuinely disturbed by how they treated a major investor. Your 4 dinner companions have been influential. They've been sharing their impressions of you, talking about your home, your character. Jennifer and Brian's credibility is damaged." I absorbed this information slowly. They hadn't just rejected me privately. They'd been systematically undermining me publicly for months, building their image on the false ruins of mine. "What happens now?" I asked. "Officially? They're both on thin ice. I'll meet with them this week, review their conduct. Might issue formal warnings." He paused. "Unofficially, their trajectory at Tech Vision is over. Nobody trusts them anymore. Nobody wants to work with people who trash-talk family members to boost their own image." We talked for another 30 minutes. Richard offered support, promised to keep me informed. When we parted, he said, "Sometimes the best revenge is just letting people face consequences." But I wasn't sure I agreed. Natural consequences felt passive. Jennifer and Brian understood power, money, status. If I wanted justice, I needed to speak their language. That afternoon, I drove to David Morris's office in Central Austin. David was a neighbor, an attorney who specialized in civil and contract law. We weren't close friends, but we'd shared occasional conversations over the years. His office was small, professional, lined with law books. He greeted me warmly, offered coffee, gestured to a chair across from his desk. "Sam, what brings you in? Everything okay?" I opened the folder I'd brought, copies of bank transfers, email requests, loan documentation, laid it out methodically. I need advice about recovering debts and protecting myself from potential retaliation. David listened as I explained. 15 years of loans. The car payment never returned. The recent $1,200. Brian's threatening phone call. Jennifer's escalating messages. He took notes, asked clarifying questions, reviewed the documentation with professional interest. "You have clear grounds for demanding repayment," he said finally. "The $15,000 for the vehicle is particularly strong. Bank transfer with her email, acknowledging it was a loan. The house down payment gets murkier if it was presented as a gift, but the car is solid. What about protection? Brian made threats. Document everything. Keep those recordings if you have them, screenshot messages. Maintain a timeline. If threats escalate to harassment, we can pursue a protective order." He paused. "There's another angle. As a major shareholder in their company, you have certain rights. You can request audits, performance reviews, departmental assessments." I looked up from my notes. "How does that work?" "Private equity shareholders, especially at your level of investment, can request information about company operations. But Sam," he leaned forward, "be careful. Using shareholder rights to address personal grievances gets complicated. It can backfire legally and professionally." "I understand." We talked for another 20 minutes. David outlined options, explained procedures, warned about pitfalls. He was thorough, professional, cautious. I took careful notes, asked specific questions, absorbed the framework. When I left his office and drove back to Lakeway, my mind was working differently than it had in days. Not dwelling on hurt, not replaying conversations, calculating instead. What leverage did I have? The loans, legal, documented, recoverable. My shareholder position, powerful but requiring careful use. Richard's support, valuable for information and credibility. Brian and Jennifer's damaged reputation, already unfolding without my intervention. What did I want? Not reconciliation. They'd proven that was impossible. Not mere repayment. That was too transactional. Something else. Something that made them understand what they'd done, made them face real consequences, made them recognize they couldn't treat people as disposable resources. Justice, education, perhaps a kind of correction. The structure of a plan began forming as I drove. Not revenge in the petty sense, something colder, more systematic, using the tools I had, the languages they understood, the leverage I'd been too kind to employ before. They'd called me weak, embarrassing, not respectable enough for their table. They were about to learn what quiet strength looked like when it decided to push back. Tuesday morning, December 2nd, I sat at my home office desk with my documentation folder open, my notebook with strategic notes beside me and my phone in hand. The plan was clear. I just needed to execute it methodically. I called Richard at 9:30. His assistant put me through immediately. Sam, good morning. Everything all right? Morning, Richard. I've been reviewing the quarterly reports for TechVision. As a significant stakeholder in Pinnacle Ventures, I'd like better visibility into operational efficiency in the sales division. Would an internal audit be appropriate? There was a pause. I could almost hear Richard's mind working through the implications. That's within your rights as a major shareholder, he said carefully. Given recent circumstances, I'd be interested in those findings myself. I'll have my operations team start today. I appreciate that. Let me know what you discover. The audit took 3 days. I went about my normal routine. Morning coffee, reviewing investment portfolios, walks around the lake. My phone remained silent. Jennifer had stopped calling after her weekend voicemails went unanswered. Friday evening, Richard called. Sam, we found problems. His voice was tight with controlled anger. Brian's been manipulating commission calculations, inflating sales figures to boost his bonuses, questionable expense reports, creative accounting with client entertainment budgets. Nothing criminal, but clear policy violations. I took notes as he talked. What's the appropriate response? Demotion, at minimum. I'm addressing it Monday morning. He'll drop from regional manager to standard sales manager. Salary reduction from $120,000 to $72,000 annually. And Jennifer? Written warning for failing to report irregularities, she should have noticed, as his colleague. She's not being demoted, but this goes in her permanent file. I thanked him for keeping me informed. After hanging up, I sat quietly, processing. The first strike had landed exactly as planned. That same afternoon, I'd received the formal demand letter David Morris had prepared. Professional, cold, legally precise. It itemized the car loan, the Thanksgiving money, plus statutory interest. Total, $7,400. Payment due within 14 days or I would file suit. David sent it certified mail to their Round Rock address. Saturday morning, my phone started ringing. Jennifer's number. I didn't answer. She left a voicemail. Dad, please call me back. We got a letter from your attorney. We can't pay $17,000 right now. Brian just got demoted. We're barely making our mortgage. Please, we need to talk about this. Sunday brought more calls, more voicemails, her voice increasingly desperate. Dad, I know you're angry, but this is too much. We'll lose the house. We have car payments, insurance. I'll pay you back, I promise. But I need time. Please answer your phone. I listened to each message once, saved them, made notes in my documentation file, evidence of their deteriorating situation. Then I went back to my normal routine. Monday morning, December 8th, I met Richard at the same cafe where we'd met the week before. Same corner table, same order. How did it go? I asked after we'd settled in. Brian took it badly. Shouted, threatened legal action, claimed he was being targeted. HR documented everything. He'll be lucky to keep the reduced position. I sipped my coffee. I've been reviewing the quarterly numbers. Brian's region has underperformed for 2 consecutive quarters. With these audit findings, maybe the division needs restructuring? Fresh leadership might improve those metrics. Richard looked at me for a long moment. You know, I've been thinking the same thing. The board's been asking questions about that region's performance. This might be the right time to make changes. We talked for another 20 minutes about company strategy, investment returns, market conditions, and when we parted in the parking lot, Richard said, I'll keep you informed about any personnel decisions. Tuesday afternoon, December 10th, Richard called. Sam thought you should know. We let Brian go this morning. Position elimination due to departmental restructuring. Jennifer's been moved to accounts management with a $15,000 salary reduction. The situation is resolved from a company perspective. I stood at my living room window, looking out at the lake. Winter had stripped the trees bare, exposing the water's gray surface. Thank you for keeping me informed, Richard. Sam, you doing okay? Yes, I think I am. After hanging up, I sat in my chair for a long time. The house was quiet. Outside, a cold front was moving in, dropping temperatures into the 40s. I thought about Jennifer and Brian in their expensive house with their expensive cars and their suddenly insufficient income. I thought about the $175,000 I'd given over 15 years, always saying yes, always hoping it would be enough. I thought about being turned away from Thanksgiving dinner because my clothes and truck didn't fit their image. The revenge was complete. Their careers destroyed, their finances in crisis, their reputation in ruins. Everything accomplished through legitimate means. Shareholder oversight, debt collection, business restructuring. Nothing illegal, nothing they could fight. But I didn't feel victorious. I felt empty. My phone buzzed with a text message. Jennifer's number. Dad, I need to see you. Can I come to your house today? Please. I stared at the message for several minutes. Then I typed a response. 2 p.m. Come alone. Wednesday morning, December 11th, I woke early and made coffee. The text from Jennifer sat on my phone like a weight. I'd agreed to see her at 2 o'clock. Now I needed to decide what I wanted from that conversation. Justice without cruelty. Consequences with a path forward. Those seemed like the right boundaries. At 1:50, I stood at my living room window, coffee cup warming my hands. A sedan pulled into my driveway. Jennifer's car, not Brian's truck. She got out slowly, looking exhausted. Her clothes were neat but ordinary, not the designer outfits from Thanksgiving. She'd lost weight. Dark circles shadowed her eyes. She walked to my door and knocked softly. I opened it, stepped back without speaking. She entered, and I gestured to the living room. She sat on the edge of the couch cushion, not relaxing back. I took my usual chair. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then Jennifer broke. Not the controlled tears of manipulation, but genuine sobbing, hard, gasping, ugly crying. Through it, words tumbled out. Dad, I'm so sorry. I've been horrible to you. I was greedy and selfish, and I turned you into something shameful when you were the only person who truly loved me. I remained still, watching, listening. I told people at work you were struggling, that I'd made it on my own despite having a father who couldn't get his life together. I used you as a story to make myself look better. I'm disgusted with myself. She wiped her face with shaking hands, pulled tissues from her purse. Brian was cheating on me for 6 months with someone from his office. I found the messages 2 days ago. When I confronted him, he said, you ruined everything, and I was stupid for not telling you to stay away from the dinner. He blamed you for his own failures. And I realized, when everything fell apart, you were the only person who ever actually cared about me. Jennifer reached into her purse and pulled out an envelope. She set it on the coffee table with trembling hands. $5,000. Everything I could gather from selling jewelry and emptying my savings account. She placed a document beside it. A notarized repayment plan for the remaining $12,400. $200 monthly. I'm not asking you to negotiate. I'm acknowledging what I owe. I picked up the envelope, opened it, counted the bank checks. $5,000 exactly. I looked at the repayment plan, professionally prepared, realistic terms. Then I tore it in half. Once, twice, 3 times. The pieces fell onto the coffee table. Jennifer's eyes went wide. Dad, I'm canceling the debt, I said quietly. Consider it a final gift from your old life to whatever comes next. She started crying again, harder. I don't deserve that. No, I agreed. You don't, but I'm doing it anyway. I stood, walked to my desk, retrieved my calendar. I sat back down and opened it to December. Every Sunday for 1 year you visit me, not when you need something, not when there's a crisis, just to be here, to talk, to rebuild what you destroyed. I mark the dates with a pen, 52 Sundays. This is non-negotiable. Miss 3 without legitimate reason, and the full debt reinstates. Jennifer looked at the marked calendar, then at me. I'll be here, every Sunday, I promise, Dad. I'll prove I can be the daughter you deserved. I accept your apology, I said. But Jennifer, acceptance isn't forgiveness, and forgiveness isn't forgetting. You'll get one chance to rebuild trust. One. And it starts with action, not words. She nodded, wiping her eyes. I'm filing for divorce. I should have done it years ago. Brian showed me who he really is when the money and status disappeared. We talked for another hour, about her job, her plans, her recognition of how badly she'd prioritized everything in her life. When she finally stood to leave, I walked her to the door. At the threshold, she turned, seemed about to hug me. I held up a hand. Not yet. Sunday, I said simply. She nodded, walked to her car. I watched until she drove away. That evening I sat on my back porch despite the December cold, coffee cup in hand. The lake was barely visible through the bare trees, the water dark and still. My phone rang, Richard's name on the screen. Sam, I have a proposition. TechVision needs strategic consulting, someone with your experience and instincts. Not full-time, but meaningful engagement. Advisory role, solid compensation, respect for your time. What do you say? I smiled genuinely for the first time in weeks. I'd like that, Richard. I'm ready to engage again. Excellent. I'll have contracts drawn up. Looking forward to working with you properly again, partner. After hanging up, I sat in the cold, feeling something close to peace. My calendar lay on the patio table beside me. This Sunday circled in red. Jennifer's first visit, the beginning of rebuilding if she proved capable of change. I thought about the past 3 weeks, the phone call asking for money, the rejection at Thanksgiving, the public humiliation, the systematic dismantling of their facade. The revenge had been complete, but more importantly, justice had been served. They'd seen me as weak because I lived modestly, as irrelevant because I didn't flaunt wealth, as disposable because I'd always said yes without conditions. They'd learned otherwise, not through rage or violence, but through the quiet application of leverage they'd never known I possessed, through the patient execution of consequences they'd earned through their own choices. I looked at my modest house, my comfortable life, the lake stretching out before me in the gathering darkness. This was enough. It had always been enough. I just needed to stop letting others tell me it wasn't. Sunday would come. Jennifer would arrive, or she wouldn't. Either way, I'd survive. I'd done the hard work of standing up for my own dignity. The rest was up to her. The coffee had gone cold in my cup, but I didn't mind. I sat there as twilight faded into night, watching the stars emerge over the lake, feeling something I hadn't felt in a very long time. Content? On my own terms, with nothing left to prove to anyone. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.